Not especially, doesn't strike me like that.
In a way, lumping them all together is an odd sort of thing to do, I would have thought. Because ghosts, to me, are, well, a bit of a joke in lots of ways, whereas karma, I do know some Buddhists, and I think they're very nice people, and in lots of ways they're, despite the fact that I'm not religious, and well, define religion, because Buddhists are not necessarily religious in the way that Christians in Leicester are, I would have said.
I wouldn't, where I come from, I believe in pure monotheism, and we do not subscribe to these images that you've talked about, because from my perspective, when people get locked into these images, they start believing in them and drawing conclusions from them, trying to get inspiration from them, then that is a slippery slope to idolatry, which is another form of organized religion, and I do not consider that to be a good way of life as far as I'm concerned.
Not really, for much the same reason as Chris did, in that I think they're not just emotion but also images of the world or of aspects of the world.
I think it's a vehicle alongside fiction, alongside Shakespeare, alongside lots of things. I don't have a problem with that.
I think it can be. I think that storytelling generally is really important in society, and they're kind of ways of exploring different hypotheses, and they act as philosophical toys. And you know, I love stories about gods and ghosts and vampires and zombies, and yeah, I think as long as you recognise that these are stories and don't take them too seriously, then it's all good fun and really interesting.
Oh. No, because, do you want to because on this? Because I think they're more about describing the world than about describing emotions. And I think the best way of describing emotions is a reference to other people, not to things, real or otherwise.
Not for me, but it may work for other people.
Well, it could be because I think that they're symbolic of that. I don't believe in most of those things literally, and I think that the symbolic representations mostly of inner states. Well, it's difficult. I think there are some dead-end options like terminal cancer, where I think probably you have to face reality that it is coming in, that there is no hope, especially if you're like me, an atheist, then it is all going to come to an end.
I think, yeah, there's a thin line sometimes between a kind of practical optimism and an optimistic delusion. So, for example, I think in many senses religion is very optimistic, and you know, I can see the idea of there being a heaven or a life after being quite comforting. And actually it's not really a harmful idea in many ways, because if you're wrong, obviously you're not going to realise. But then there are other kind of more optimistic delusions like, oh, I'll go to war because God's on my side and I'm bound to win, and I think that kind of thing is quite dangerous.
Well, there's wishing for the best and there's planning for the worst, and I think you need a mixture of optimism and pessimism. An optimist says the glass is half full. Pessimist says the glass is half empty. The engineer says the glass is too big.
I think that's very difficult. If you were about to crash into the Atlantic, it would be fairly difficult to be optimistic, I would have thought. But generally speaking, optimism is a good thing, I'd have said.
We all have to always hope. Mankind lives in hope, and therefore there is a certain element of optimism there. That is not to say that there can never be pessimism, but we all live in hope, having made the effort in any one direction, either in your profession, in your business, in your domestic life, in your social life, in your married life, you have to hope for the best, having put in the effort. You can only hope for the best if you put in the effort. You cannot hope for the best. You cannot be optimistic if you've not put any work into it.
Any situations? No, I would hope that people are optimistic. I think if you give up your optimism, you're in danger of getting quite depressed. So I think it's a very important facet in people coping with their lives, really.
You shouldn't wish for the best outcome. I think we should wish for the best outcome in all circumstances, but the best outcome might not be what we actually want. Maybe something different. You know, someone could be wishing for someone to recover from an illness or to get a job or win the lottery, and they might identify that as the best outcome, but it might not be in the scheme of things.
Well, I suppose there are times when things seem pretty dire, and I don't know if optimistic is the right word. I think perhaps even when things are pretty dire, you should try to be positive, have a positive mindset rather than optimistic.
It all depends on what you mean by the best outcome. A person in terminal illness may rationally wish for death. It's the best outcome, but that sounds a bit grim, but
In a way, I've never met an angel so far, and I don't think I'm very likely to.
No.
I think I'd be really scared if I was visited by an angel. I've got friends who are schizophrenic and are quite frequently visited by lots of religious characters and hearing the voice of God, and I think that would be terrifying for me personally. I'd just rush to my doctor.
I personally don't, no.
That belief, I think, is with some other people. I am a Muslim, and therefore we have different kinds of belief in our own perspective. And the question you've asked is very bland, is very simplistic, and it only appeals to perhaps people who are steeped into that kind of culture. And of course people believe in angels. Islam believes in angels, most certainly. Islam does not believe in reincarnation, but many other faiths do. So it's where you come from. But the question you've asked does not deserve a simplistic answer. The answer I've given you is a more comprehensive one.
No way.
no.
No.